My brother shoved my 10-year-old son down a steep basement staircase at Thanksgiving after he refused to give up his seat. My mother blocked me from reaching him. He needed to learn his place. 15 minutes later, 2 paramedics were inside the house while a deputy pulled my brother aside and said, The brass timer rang at 3:47, and I pulled the roasting pan from my mother's oven with both hands. Steam rolled up and caught the light above the counter. The turkey was done. It was always done when that timer rang because my father had calibrated it 30 years ago, and it had never been wrong. My name is Piper Callahan. I am 33 years old. I work as a payroll manager for a logistics company, which means I process direct deposits and tax withholdings for 200 employees and notice when numbers do not match. I am also a single mother to a 10-year-old boy named Rowan, who is sitting at my mother's dining table with his hands folded in his lap, waiting for grace. The timer had a dent on the left side. I put it there when I was 7. I dropped it on the kitchen floor and cried because I thought I had broken it. My father picked it up, turned it over once, and said, "Now it's got character." He never fixed the dent. I never stopped carrying the timer. Every Thanksgiving, I brought it to my mother's house and set it on the counter next to the stove. Every Thanksgiving, it timed the turkey. It was the only piece of my father that still worked exactly the way he left it. My father, Ed Callahan, died 5 years ago. Heart failure. 61 years old. He left behind a house, a life insurance policy, and 2 adult children who had never once agreed on anything at that dining table. My brother Clint was 37. Warehouse supervisor at a distribution center during the week, volunteer Little League coach on Saturdays. The neighborhood called him Coach Vinny. He had a wife named Tony, a daughter named Bria who was 8, and a permanent seat at the head of my mother's table. My mother Lucille made sure of that. She had always made sure of that. Clint was the son who stayed close, the son who mowed the lawn, the son who got a plate made first at every holiday. I was the daughter who moved 12 miles away into a 2-bedroom apartment and processed other people's paychecks. My Aunt Greta, my mother's older sister, was standing near the hutch pouring water into glasses. She had been a school nurse for 30 years before she retired. Greta was not a loud woman. She noticed things the way nurses notice things, quietly, from the side of the room where nobody thinks anyone is watching. She picked up the brass timer from the counter and ran her thumb over the dent. Then she looked at Rowan. "Your grandfather made that dent a gift," she said. "Most people would have thrown it away." Rowan smiled. He had a careful smile, the kind that shows up slowly, like he is making sure it is safe first. He was small for 10. Quiet, he read books about dinosaurs and drew pictures of birds, and he had never once raised his voice at a family dinner. My brother considered this a defect. Clint arrived 40 minutes late. He came through the front door without knocking, dropped his jacket on the couch, and walked into the dining room like the meal had been waiting for him. It had. My mother had not let anyone sit down until he arrived. She had made that clear at 3:15 when Rowan asked if he could start eating the rolls. "We wait for your uncle," she said. "This is his holiday, too. His holiday. My turkey, my timer, my 6 hours of cooking. My son's drawings taped to the napkin rings he had made at school. But Clint's holiday." He kissed my mother on the cheek. He shook Greta's hand like she was a client. He walked past me without speaking. Then he looked at the table and saw Rowan. "When did the kid get here?" He said to Lucille. Not to me, to my mother, as if Rowan were a delivery she had accepted on his behalf. "Piper brought him at noon," Lucille said. "He's been helping in the kitchen." Clint grunted. He looked at Rowan for a long moment, then at the chair Rowan was sitting in. His chair. The chair closest to the window, the one with the slightly higher back, the one my father used to sit in before Clint claimed it the Thanksgiving after Ed died. Rowan was sitting in the chair closest to the window, the chair Clint always sat in. Rowan did not know it was Clint's chair because no one had told him and because it was just a chair. Clint stopped behind Rowan. "You're in my seat, buddy." Rowan looked up. "I was here first, Uncle Clint." "There's another chair right there." The table had 5 other empty chairs. My mother had set 7 places. Tony, sitting across the table with Bria on her lap, went still. I noticed her hand tighten on Bria's shoulder. At the time, I did not understand why. "I'm not asking you to find me another chair," Clint said. "I'm telling you to get out of mine." I was in the kitchen doorway, roasting pan still in my hands. "Clint, there are 5 other chairs. Let him sit." Clint did not look at me. He kept his eyes on Rowan. "Your mother lets you talk back at home?" "He's not talking back," I said. "He's sitting in a chair." Clint turned to me. He looked at the roasting pan in my hands, then at my apron, then at my face, and something shifted in his expression. Something that had been building all afternoon, all year, maybe all his life. That kid sits in a 2-bedroom apartment eating cereal for dinner because his mother couldn't keep a husband and can't keep a job that matters. He sits where I tell him to sit in this house. He is not Ed's little project. He is not anything. And neither are you, Piper. Greta set down the water pitcher. Tony closed her eyes. My mother, standing at the kitchen counter slicing bread, said nothing. I opened my mouth. I did not get the word out. Clint grabbed Rowan by the back of his shirt collar and yanked him out of the chair. Rowan's feet left the ground for a full second. The basement door was 3 steps behind the chair. It was open because my mother always left it open during holidays to let the cool air rise from the cellar. Clint shoved Rowan toward the doorway. Rowan hit the frame with his shoulder, lost his footing on the top step, and went down. 12 concrete steps. Steep, narrow, unfinished, the kind of stairs my father had always said he would replace and never got the chance to. I heard Rowan hit the 4th step with his shoulder, then the 7th with his hip, then a sound at the bottom that was not a step, then nothing. I dropped the roasting pan. It hit the floor and the handle cracked off and the turkey slid sideways and I did not care. I was at the basement door in 2 steps, and my mother was in front of me. Lucille Callahan. 5'4", 61 years old. She put both hands flat against my shoulders and pushed me back from the doorway. Her face was calm, not angry, not panicked. Calm, the kind of calm that comes from practice. "He needed to learn his place," she said. 4 words. My mother said 4 words while my 10-year-old son was at the bottom of 12 concrete steps with blood running down his forehead and his wrist bent at an angle that made my stomach turn before I even reached him. I pushed past her. I remember my hands on the railing and the concrete under my feet and Rowan at the bottom, sitting against the wall with his left arm cradled in his lap. His eyes were open. He was not crying. He was looking at his wrist like it belonged to someone else. A line of blood ran from above his left eyebrow down to his chin. I knelt beside him. "Don't move it. Don't move anything. I'm right here." I pulled my phone out and dialed 911 with one hand while I pressed my sleeve against the cut on his forehead with the other. Behind me, upstairs, I could hear my mother telling Clint to sit down, not telling him to check on Rowan, not telling him to call for help, telling him to sit down. And Clint's voice, irritated, not guilty. He should have moved when I told him to. If you have ever watched your child bleed in a place where you were supposed to be safe, you know there is a silence that happens inside your chest. It is not calm. It is not peace. It is the sound of something rearranging itself permanently. And once it finishes, it does not go back. The paramedics arrived in 11 minutes. 2 of them came through the front door with a stretcher and a medical bag, and they were professional and fast, and they did not look at Clint. A deputy arrived 4 minutes after them. Deputy Harmon. He separated Clint from the room immediately, walked him to the front porch, and told him to sit on the steps and not move. Then he came back inside, asked me what happened before he asked anyone else, and wrote everything down without looking up. He photographed the staircase, the blood on the bottom step, the torn collar of Rowan's shirt, and the broken roasting pan handle where I had dropped it. He asked Greta and Tony for statements separately. Rowan was loaded onto the stretcher, fractured wrist in 2 places. Mild concussion, a cut above his left eyebrow that would need 4 stitches. 71 pounds. My brother weighed 220. I was about to climb into the ambulance when I heard the deputy's voice from the dining room. The front door was still open. The house was small, and every word carried. Deputy Harmon was standing near the table. Clint was sitting in the chair Rowan had been pulled from. The deputy had his hand resting on his belt, and he was speaking in a tone I recognized from every procedural show Rowan had ever made me watch, except this was not a show, and the person he was speaking to was my brother. "Mr. Callahan, I need you to listen carefully. I responded to this address in September of last year. Same staircase, 7-year-old girl." He paused. "Your daughter. Your mother told me it was an accident. I filed the report anyway." The room changed. Tony's head turned so fast her hair swung. Greta, who was standing in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel in her hand, lowered it slowly. My mother's hand stopped on the counter, palm flat, fingers spread. "So I need to ask you directly," Deputy Harmon said. "Is that what we're calling tonight?" I stood in the ambulance doorway with the flashing lights painting the walls behind me, and I looked at my mother's face. She was not looking at Deputy Harmon. She was not looking at Clint. She was looking at Tony. And on her face was not guilt or fear or shock. It was a warning. That was when I understood. Whatever had happened in this house was not one night. It was not one mistake. It was a structure. And the structure had a floor plan I had never been shown. If you are watching this and you know what it feels like to realize your family has rooms you were never allowed to enter, subscribe to Karma Unfolded because this story is just getting started. I rode in the ambulance with Rowan. He held my hand with his right hand because his left wrist was in a temporary splint. The paramedic across from me asked standard questions. Name, age, allergies. I answered all of them because Rowan's jaw was clenched and his eyes were fixed on the ceiling, and he was doing the thing he always did when he was in pain. He was being quiet. He was being so quiet that the paramedic glanced at me to confirm he was conscious. "He's awake," I said. "He's just like his grandfather. He goes still when it hurts." At the hospital, they set the fracture in 2 places, cast the wrist from palm to elbow, stitched the 4-centimeter cut above his left eyebrow with 4 sutures, and ran a concussion protocol that took 90 minutes. A nurse asked me twice if I wanted to call someone. I did not have anyone to call. My ex-husband was in another state. My mother was the reason my son was in the bed. My father was dead. Greta had stayed behind at the house with Tony, and I did not yet understand why that mattered. The ER bill came to $1,200. I paid it with a credit card I had been saving for Rowan's spring field trip because there was no one else to split it with. The billing clerk handed me the receipt and said, "Happy Thanksgiving." She did not mean it unkindly. She was tired. Everyone in that hospital was tired. After they finished, I sat in the chair beside his bed. He was asleep. The fluorescent light made his face look flat and pale and too small for the pillow. His cast was white and thick, and it covered his hand almost to the fingers. He was 10 years old, and he had been thrown down a flight of stairs by a man 3 times his weight because he sat in a chair. I sat there, and I made a list, not on paper, in my head. The way I make lists at work when a payroll discrepancy shows up and I need to trace it before the next cycle. The things I knew: Clint shoved my son down a staircase. My mother blocked me from reaching him. Deputy Harmon had been to that house before for the same staircase and a different child. My mother had called it an accident then. My mother had called tonight discipline. The things I did not know yet. But I would. Tony called me at 9:40 the next morning, a Friday. Her voice was flat and careful, the voice of someone who had rehearsed a sentence 40 times and was afraid to stop in the middle of it. "Piper, I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me finish before you respond." "Okay." Bria did not fall last September. Clint pushed her. She grabbed his phone during a football game, and he shoved her into the basement door. She went down 6 steps before she caught the railing. Her shoulder was bruised for 3 weeks. I took her to urgent care and told them she fell off a scooter. She paused. "Because your mother told me if I said anything to anyone, she would make sure Clint got full custody in the divorce. She said she had a lawyer who owed her a favor. She said I would lose Bria. And I believed her. Did anyone else know?" The urgent care called the backup number Tony had listed on the intake form. Lucille was Bria's emergency contact. She answered and told the doctor Tony was unavailable and asked him to leave the information with her. Then she deleted the voicemail from Tony's phone before Tony ever heard it. "Tony, do you have the urgent care receipt?" "Yes, September 19th, left shoulder contusion. 7-year-old female. I kept it in my glove box. I kept everything. Send me copies, all of it." "I should have told you," she said. She was crying now. Not loud, the kind of crying where you hold the phone away from your face and breathe through your mouth. "You are telling me now," I said. "That counts." I hung up and I sat on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet and my phone in my lap, and I looked at the brass timer on the counter above me. It was not ticking. I had not wound it since Thanksgiving morning. It sat there, silent, and dented, and wrong, and I thought about my father's hands winding it every November, and I thought about what he would say if he could see what his family had become. I almost called my mother that night. I had her number pulled up, thumb hovering over the green button. Then I looked at the timer, silent, unwound, like it was waiting for someone to give it a reason to start again. I put the phone down. Saturday morning, 2 days after Thanksgiving, Aunt Greta knocked on my apartment door at 8:15. She was carrying a cardboard box sealed with packing tape that had yellowed at the edges. She did not say hello. She set the box on my kitchen table and sat down across from me and folded her hands. "Your father gave me this box 3 months before he died," she said. "He brought it to my house on a Tuesday morning when your mother was at her hair appointment. He said, if Lucille ever tries to erase Piper, give her this." She paused. "I should have given it to you the day he died. I was not brave enough. I told myself it was not my business. Then I watched your mother block that stairwell with her body, and I understood that not giving you this box was the same as standing behind her." "Why now?" I asked. "He died 5 years ago. Why did you wait?" "Because I told myself it was between Lucille and her children, that it was not my fight. I was wrong, Piper. I watched your mother stand in front of that stairwell with your son bleeding at the bottom, and I understood that every year I stayed quiet was a year I helped her." She peeled the tape off. Inside were 3 things. The first was Ed Callahan's life insurance policy, the original document, not a copy. The face value printed on page 1 in bold type, $320,000. The beneficiary was the Ed Callahan Family Trust, which named both children as equal recipients. Not Lucille personally, both of us, equal share. My mother had told me the policy was worth $50,000. She said the funeral cost $22,000, the remaining medical bills took the rest, and there was nothing left. I had believed her because she was my mother, and because I was 28 and grieving, and because it did not occur to me that the woman who raised me would steal from me while I was burying my father. The second item was the recorded transfer on death deed for my mother's house, the house my father built with a contractor friend over 2 summers. If Ed died first, his share of ownership passed equally to both children, Piper Callahan, Clint Callahan. Both names, black ink. The third was a sealed envelope. My father's handwriting on the front for Piper, if she needs it. I opened it. Inside was a single page, dated 3 months before my father died. It was short. Piper, if you are reading this, your mother has done something with the money or the house or both. I could not stop her from planning it. I could only make sure you had the proof. The policy is real. The deed is real. Do not let anyone tell you different. I love you. Take care of the timer. I read it twice. Then I set it on the table and I looked at Greta and I said, "How much did she tell me the policy was worth? I don't know the number she told you." 50,000. She told me 50,000 and that it was used up. Greta closed her eyes and exhaled through her nose like she had been holding that breath for 5 years. I am a payroll manager. I process 200 direct deposits every 2 weeks. I reconcile tax withholdings quarterly. I catch misclassified employees before the year's does. I know what a payment schedule looks like the way a carpenter knows what a joint looks like. Greta's box gave me the policy, the deed, and Ed's letter. But the financial trail came later. Adler filed a discovery request within the first week, and the bank records arrived 10 days after that. When I opened them at my kitchen table, I did not need more than 11 minutes. The pattern was textbook. Same amount, same date, every month. $2,400 deposited into an account ending in 4471. For 4 years, 48 months, $115,200. My mother had been paying my brother a salary from my dead father's life insurance, not randomly, not in emergencies, on a schedule. Like silence was a job, and $2,400 a month was the going rate. I sat at my kitchen table with the statements spread in front of me, and I did the math the way I do it at work. Total policy, $320,000. Funeral and medical costs, approximately $35,000 based on what I could verify. Remaining, $285,000. Dispersed to Clint over 4 years, $115,200. Remaining balance, I did not have access to the current account, but the payments had not stopped as of the most recent statement, which was 8 months old. The $50,000 my mother told me was the entire policy was less than half of what she had paid my brother. I sat with that number for a long time. $2,400 a month. That was the exact cost of the after-school program I had looked into for Rowan when he started 4th grade. A structured homework and activity center, 3 days a week, $47 per week. I could not afford it. I told Rowan we would figure something out next year. We did not figure it out next year. My mother was mailing my brother $2,400 a month while I was telling my son I could not afford $47 a week. I almost drove to that house at midnight. I had my keys in my hand and my shoes on. Then I walked past Rowan's bedroom and I saw the cast on his arm through the doorway. White against the dark blue pillowcase, his fingers curled around the edge of it in his sleep. I put the keys back on the hook. I would not do this on anger. I would do this on proof. Monday morning, I dropped Rowan at school, drove to work, processed the biweekly payroll for 200 employees by 10 a.m., and then sat in my office with the door closed and pulled my own 2022 tax return from the filing cabinet I kept in the bottom drawer. The return had been rejected by the IRS 3 months earlier for a duplicate dependent claim. At the time, I assumed it was a system error. I called the IRS, filed a dispute, and put the letter back in the drawer. It was the kind of thing that happens when Social Security numbers get transposed. I dealt with it at work 3 or 4 times a year. Now I read it the way I read a payroll discrepancy. Not for what the letter said, but for what it meant. Rowan had been claimed as a dependent by another filer. Not a random filer, someone who had Rowan's full Social Security number. I requested a transcript. The duplicate claim went back 4 consecutive years. The child tax credit alone was $2,000 per year. Earned income credit adjustments added approximately $450 to $600 annually. Total fraudulent credits over 4 years, approximately $8,200. With penalties and interest, estimated Ayer's exposure would be closer to $14,600. Clint had been claiming my son on his taxes for 4 years. He did not have Rowan's social security number from me. There was only one person who had it: my mother. She had helped me fill out the childcare paperwork after my divorce when she watched Rowan 2 afternoons a week. She had his social security card number in her filing cabinet the entire time. Thursday, I pulled the property records from the county recorder's website. I typed in the address: my mother's house, the house my father built. The current deed was a quitclaim, filed 6 months after my father's death. It transferred full ownership to Lucille Callahan and Clint Callahan. My name had been removed. No notification, no signature, no consent. The signature line that was supposed to be mine had a signature on it that was not mine. The notary's stamp was from a county I had not set foot in for 6 years, my father's house, appraised at $285,000. And my name had been erased from it the way you erase a line from a spreadsheet. Quietly, permanently, like I was never on it. I almost let the whole thing go, not because I forgave them, because I was tired in a way that sleep does not fix. 5 years of tired. Then I opened the kitchen drawer and took out my father's letter. I looked at the date. 3 months before he died. He had known. He had prepared. He had trusted me to do something with the proof when the time came. I would not waste his last act of fatherhood by being too tired to use it. Friday, I called an attorney named Adler. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, which is how you know a lawyer is already building the case in his head. By the end of the call, we had 4 filings planned: a supplemental police statement and child protection report for Bria's prior injury, supported by Tony's documentation and Deputy Harmon's original report. Ear's fraud report for the duplicate dependent claims. Civil suit for estate restitution, which would include Lucille's physical interference at the stairwell as evidence that she enabled the assault and delayed aid to an injured minor. And the felony assault referral, which Deputy Harmon had already initiated. If you are still watching this and you think my family had finished surprising me, stay with Karma Unfolded, because the confrontation is what I built every document for. Saturday, December 13th. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving. I drove to my mother's house alone. The porch light was on even during the day, the way it always was. The hook on the kitchen wall where the brass timer used to hang was empty. I had not brought it. Lucille opened the door, and I could see on her face that she expected an olive branch, or a negotiation, or the version of Piper who showed up every year with the timer and the turkey and the willingness to fill every silence with forgiveness. I sat at the kitchen table. I placed the original life insurance policy on the table between us, face value up, $320,000 in bold. She looked at it. She did not pick it up. Her right hand moved to the table's edge and gripped it. The color in her cheeks pulled back like a tide going out. Where is the $270,000 you told me did not exist? Piper, you need to understand. The house needed work. The roof alone was $14,000. Clint was going through a difficult time with the warehouse, and he needed help getting on his feet, and I was trying to keep this family together after your father died. You had your job. You were managing. Clint was not. I was managing, I said, because no one offered me anything else. You told me the policy was $50,000 and that it was gone. You told me there was nothing left. Then you paid Clint $2,400 a month for 4 years. 48 payments, $115,200. That is not how it was. That is exactly how it was. I read the bank statements, Mom, every deposit. Same amount, same date, same account. I processed payroll for 200 people. You think I cannot read a disbursement schedule? She opened her mouth. I watched her try to find a sentence that would work and fail. I am not here to listen, I said. I am here to tell you what happens Monday. Adler files on Monday. Everything. I stood up. I did not slam the door. I did not raise my voice. I walked out and I left the door open behind me because I wanted her to feel the December air come in, and I wanted her to sit at that table with the policy in front of her and the cold on her neck and understand that the conversation she had been avoiding for 5 years had just started, and I was the one running it now. She called Clint that night. I knew she would. That was the point. Sunday, December 14th. I arrived at my mother's house at 10 a.m. This time, Greta was beside me, and behind Greta, walking up the porch steps with a folder in her hands and her jaw set hard, was Tony. Clint was already inside. Lucille had called him the night before, panicked, crying, begging him to come and fix this. He was sitting at the dining table, same chair, the one Rowan had been dragged out of. He looked at me, and then at Greta, and then at Tony, and his expression shifted from irritation to something colder. "What is this, Piper? An intervention? You brought my aunt and my wife to ambush me in my mother's house?" I did not answer his question. "You shoved my son down 12 concrete steps and called it discipline," I said. "That is felony assault on a minor, and the referral is already with the prosecutor. You claimed my son on your tax returns for 4 years without my knowledge or consent. That is identity theft and tax fraud." I turned to my mother. "Mom, you took $270,000 from Dad's life insurance policy and told me the total was $50,000. That is theft. You removed my name from a deed Dad put both of us on 6 months after he died. That is forgery. You paid Clint $2,400 a month for 4 years to keep quiet about all of it. That is conspiracy." I turned back to Clint. "And 14 months ago, you shoved your own daughter down these same stairs. Mom told Deputy Harmon it was an accident. Tony is here to tell you what actually happened." Tony stepped forward. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was not. She opened her folder and read from the urgent care receipt. September 19th. Left shoulder contusion, 7-year-old female. Bruise pattern flagged by the attending physician as inconsistent with a scooter fall. Follow-up call placed to the emergency contact number on the intake form. She looked at Lucille. "That was you. You told the doctor I was unavailable. You asked him to leave the information with you. Then you deleted his voicemail from my phone before I ever heard it." Lucille pressed both palms flat on the table. "Tony, you are making a mistake." "The mistake," Tony said, "was letting you hold my daughter over my head for 14 months. Clint stood up. "This is garbage. Every word." "Tony, sit down." "You don't know what you're saying." "Sit down, Clint," Greta said. She did not raise her voice. 30 years of keeping order in a school nurse's office had given her a voice that did not need volume. Clint looked at her, and I watched him calculate how many people in the room were on his side. The number was 0. "You're all going to regret this," he said. But he sat. "Rowan eats cereal in a 2-bedroom apartment because I spend my paycheck on him," I said. "Not on bailing out a grown man who shoves children down staircases. My job that doesn't matter? It is the one that caught your tax fraud in 11 minutes. And the husband I couldn't keep? He sends child support on the 1st of every month. You can't even send your own daughter the truth." Clint's jaw locked. The muscle in his right cheek pulsed like something trapped under the skin. His hands dropped to his sides, and then his right hand reached behind him and gripped the back of the dining chair. His knuckles turned white. The chair scraped 3 inches across the linoleum. His breathing changed. Shallow, through his mouth, audible from across the room. "You're bluffing," he said. "You don't have anything. You're a payroll clerk." "The ears has the amended returns," I said. "CP's has Tony's statement and Deputy Harmon's original incident report. My attorney has the deed, the policy, and 4 years of bank statements. Do you want to tell me again what I don't have?" His face drained. "Not all at once. From the forehead down, like a shade being lowered behind his skin." He sat without choosing to sit. His knees folded and he dropped into the chair. His palms went flat on the table. They were wet. You could see the marks on the wood. "You can't prove any of this in court," he said. His voice was climbing. "Tony's lying. She's angry about the divorce. She'll say anything." Tony held up the urgent care receipt. September 19th. Your daughter's name. The doctor's handwriting. "This is not a story, Clint. This is a medical record." Clint looked at Lucille. "Mom, say something. Tell them this is a misunderstanding." Lucille's mouth moved, but nothing came out. She was looking at the bank statements on the table like they were photographs of a crime scene, and she was the one standing in every picture. Clint turned back to me. His voice dropped. Quieter now, the bargaining voice. "I can fix this," he said. "Piper, listen, let me fix it." He reached into his jacket. He pulled out a folded check. The crease down the middle was sharp. He had written it before he arrived. He slid it across the table. $20,000. His handwriting. His signature. "Take it," he said. "We're square. $20,000 against $115,200 in stolen disbursements, against $285,000 in property fraud, against $14,600 in IRS penalties, against $1,200 in emergency room bills I paid alone, against 4 stitches and a fractured wrist on a 10-year-old boy who weighed 71 pounds. Mom, call her off," Clint said. His voice had climbed half an octave. "Tell her to take the check. Tell her this is a family matter and we can work this out the way we always have." "The way you always have," Greta said, "is the problem." Lucille did not speak. She was staring at the life insurance policy still sitting on the table from yesterday, and at the bank statements Greta had spread beside it, and at the county recorder printout showing the quitclaim deed with her signature. She was looking at the architecture of 5 years of theft laid out in a row, and there was nothing she could say to make it look like anything other than what it was. I reached into my coat pocket and took out the brass timer. I set it on the table. I wound it slowly. The ticking filled the room the way a heartbeat fills a quiet hallway. I set it down in front of Clint, next to his check. "Dad's timer ran for 33 years before you broke it. The IRS runs longer." Clint looked at the timer. He did not look at me. He did not look at anyone. "This is the last holiday, the last favor, the last time I carry Dad's timer into this house. My amended returns are ready for filing. The ears fraud report goes out Monday. CP's has Tony's statement. Do not call me. Do not send anyone to my apartment. We are done." I picked up the timer. I put it back in my pocket. I left the check on the table. I walked out of my mother's house for the last time. Greta followed me. Tony followed Greta. The 3 of us stood on the porch for a moment without speaking. The December air was sharp, and the sky was flat gray, and the porch light was still on in the middle of the day. Somewhere inside, Clint was sitting at a table with a $20,000 check no one had touched and wet palm prints drying on the wood. The following Saturday, December 20th, Clint drove to the rec center for Little League practice. He parked in his usual spot near the equipment shed. He walked toward the field with his coaching bag over his shoulder and a bucket of baseballs in his left hand. The board president was standing at the chain-link gate. His name was Greer. He had known Clint for 4 seasons. He did not extend his hand. "We need your equipment bag." Clint, the board, met Thursday evening. Thursday? Nobody told me about a meeting. It was an emergency session. We received notice of the police investigation involving injury to a minor. 2 parents on the bleachers stood up. One of them, a father named Darnell, whose son Clint had coached for 3 years, walked onto the warning track and put his hand on his son's shoulder. "Pack up, Andre. We're leaving." He looked at Clint across 30 feet of infield dirt. "We're done, Coach." A mother near the dugout pulled her daughter off the bench without a word. She picked up the girl's glove and water bottle and walked to the parking lot without looking back. Clint looked at the roster board on the chain-link fence. His name had been covered with a strip of painter's tape. Someone had written another name underneath it in black marker. The tape was crooked. Nobody had bothered to make it neat. Bria was not there. Tony had kept her home. Greer held out his hand for the bag. The parents voted unanimously. Clint, every single one. Clint set the bag on the ground. He put the bucket beside it. He walked back to his truck and sat in the driver's seat for 14 minutes. The field lights were already off. The parking lot emptied around him, one car at a time. 3 weeks later, in early January, the EARS audit notification arrived at my mother's house by certified mail. The postal carrier rang the bell and waited for a signature. My mother signed for it at the door in her housecoat, the one she wore when she had not been expecting anyone. 3 pages. Clint's returns flagged for 4 consecutive tax years. Fraudulent dependent claims on a minor child. Penalties, back taxes, and interest, $14,600. The letter contained a response deadline, 30 days. It contained the phrase, potential referral for criminal investigation in the second paragraph. Greta told me that Lucille called Clint 11 minutes after opening it. She told me Clint did not answer the first 3 calls. On the 4th call, he picked up and said, "How bad is it?" And Lucille read him the number and the word criminal, and neither of them spoke for 8 seconds. A separate letter from Adler's office arrived 2 days later. Civil suit filed, a state restitution, $115,200 in undisclosed insurance disbursements. Property fraud, petition to void the quitclaim deed on a $285,000 house. Demand for full accounting of Ed Callahan's estate within 60 days. The filing was 41 pages. Greta told me that Lucille called her crying halfway through page 9, asking what half the words meant. Greta did not answer the call. She listened to the voicemail later. My mother's kitchen table, the same table where she served Thanksgiving for 30 years, now held 3 stacks of legal documents she could not answer and could not afford to fight. The money she would need for an attorney was the money she had been sending to Clint for 4 years. The account was running dry. The payments had stopped because the case had started, and without the payments, Clint had no buffer either. Lucille called Greta once. Greta did not answer. Lucille left a voicemail that said, "You chose her over your own sister." Greta told me about it later. She said, "I told her voicemail, Ed chose Piper too. That should have told you something." In mid-January, Tony told Greta what happened next, and Greta told me. Clint called the recreation center in the neighboring county. He asked about volunteer coaching positions for the spring season. The woman on the phone was friendly. She asked his name. She asked him to hold. He waited 3 minutes. When she came back, her voice was different. "I'm sorry, Mr. Callahan. We filled all volunteer positions for this season." He knew she had searched his name. He knew what she found. He sat in his truck in that parking lot with the engine off and the field dark and the dashboard clock reading 4:47 p.m. He started to dial my number, got 4 digits in, deleted them, put the phone face down on the passenger seat, did not start the engine for 9 minutes. Rowan's cast came off the first week of January. He flexed his fingers in the doctor's office and turned his wrist back and forth like he was testing whether it still belonged to him. On the drive home, he said, "Mom, are we going to Grandma's for Easter?" "No, buddy, we're going to do our own thing this year." He nodded. He did not ask why. 10-year-olds understand more than we give them credit for. They wait to see if we are going to tell them the truth or ask them to pretend. I was done pretending. My mother's dining room, the last time Greta drove past the house, had 2 chairs pulled up to a table set for 7. 5 place settings had been cleared. The hook on the kitchen wall where the brass timer hung for 30 years was bare. A thin rectangle of lighter paint marked where it used to sit. Legal envelopes were stacked on the counter near the bread box, one of them still sealed. The house was quiet in a way that had nothing to do with the season. It was the quiet of a place where the people inside had run out of things they were willing to say to each other. My apartment is small. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a kitchen with a window that faces east. Rowan's drawings are taped to the fridge. There are 7 of them now. The newest is a bird, a robin, drawn carefully in colored pencil. He made it for Aunt Greta because she told him once that his grandfather used to whistle like a robin while he worked in the garage. The brass timer sits on the counter. I installed a small brass hook for it myself with a drill and a level on the wall beside the spice rack. It hangs there the way it hung in my father's kitchen. Same dent, same weight, same sound when it ticks. It is Saturday morning, late January, frost on the window, coffee in my hand. Rowan is at the table drawing with his right hand. His left wrist is healed, and he has started using it again, slowly, the way you use something you are learning to trust. The timer ticks on the counter behind me. It rings. Rowan looks up. "Turkey's done?" "No," I say, just checking it still works. I wind it again, set it back on the hook. It ticks. Rowan goes back to his drawing. The robin is getting a second wing now. He is drawing each feather separately, one at a time, the way my father used to build things. Slowly, correctly, like he intended them to last. No one is coming to this apartment today. No one needs to. The timer ticks and the coffee steams and the frost on the window catches the morning light, and for the first time in 5 years, the only people at my table are the ones who are supposed to be here. If this story reminded you that your silence is not the same as peace, and that the people who tell you to know your place are usually the ones standing on something they stole, subscribe to Karma Unfolded. I will see you in the next one.